Is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Budget and Performance Committee. Can I firstly just ask everyone to make sure your electronic devices are switched to silent mode, and then can I ask the committee to note its changed membership as agreed by the London Assembly on the 13th of November 2025. Specifically, welcome to Assembly Member Alex Wilson, who now joins us. Can I ask our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Assembly Member Desai.
Sorry, Kripesh, was that?
I was just saying, and Ellie.
Apologies. I'm so sorry. And also, in no way the lesser, welcome to Assembly Member Baker, who also joins us on the committee. Sorry, Ellie, I do apologise. It wasn't this. This is why they write everything down in a script, and when you go off script, you go wrong. So, item 2, declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Can we confirm minutes of the meetings held on the 21st of October to be signed by me as a correct record? Summary list of actions. Can I ask the committee to note the completed and outstanding actions from its previous meetings? And items taken under delegated authority. Apologies, this is a long one. Can I ask the committee to note the recent actions taken by me as chairman under delegated authority following consultation with party group lead members, namely to agree a letter to the Mayor regarding tracking delivery of the Mayor's 2024 manifesto commitments, a letter to the Mayor regarding Q1 25-26 GLA group performance reports, and a letter to the Mayor regarding the Mayor's 26-27 budget, the external view. Noted. Good. Well done. That now brings us to our main item this morning, which is the Greater London Authority Mayor's draft budget for 26-27. So we're joined by a large group of people. So I'd like to welcome all of the guests who've joined us this morning. We have David Bellamy, who is the Mayor's Chief of Staff. We have Richard Watts, who is the Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff. We have Mary Hartley, who is the GLA Chief Officer, and Faye Hammond, who's their Chief Finance Officer. We have Deanne Tranmer, who's the Executive Director, Corporate Resources and Business Improvement. We have Tunde Olayinka, Executive Director, Communities and Social Policy. Phil Graham, who's the Executive Director of Good Growth. Elliot Ball, who's the Assistant Director, Group Finance and Performance. And Peter Sebastian, who's the Director, Financial Services. So I think that brings us to our first question, which is by me. So if I start with you, David, and then Mary. The big question overhanging this GLA Mayor budget is the uncertainty, which you've made no secret of. The unprecedented uncertainty in the GLA's financial position. Could you give us an outline of where you think things stand right now and how you hope or expect that uncertainty to unwind over the coming weeks and months?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. It's obviously always been the case that we're reliant on things later in the budget process when we bring this draft budget forward at this early stage. Sometimes, and it's certainly the case this year, this is before the government's annual budget, and it's always been, certainly in my time here, before the government's provisional settlements. There is clearly more uncertainty about those provisional settlements than there were in previous years, because we know the government is undertaking a major review of local government funding, which will impact us. There are major changes to the business rate system, both things like the revaluation and different rates for different types of ratepayer, and which in theory shouldn't impact our finances, but do create some uncertainty for billing authorities. And also then the reset of business rate growth, which most definitely will affect us. So where we are is MHCLG have said they're going to produce a policy statement that will set out their approach to those issues I just mentioned. We expect that sometime between now and the end of the month. That is going to set out the government's policy, but it won't give us any numbers. The numbers will come in the provisional settlement, and that will be just before the Christmas Parliament rises for Christmas, we expect. So from there, and we expect, given the nature of the funding review, it's not just going to be a case of reading GLA, this amount of money, right, we know where we are. It will be much more complicated than that and different from last year, and it's usual in any case for Elliot's team to need to seek some clarification from government officials. And we will run that process up until Christmas, and then in the new year we'll be presenting the findings and options to the Mayor, so that when we set out the draft group budget on the 15th of January, we can apply the provisional settlements in that, and the Mayor can set out his proposals on that basis.
Okay. Mary, did you want to add to that? No? Okay. In amongst the uncertainty, there's obviously, it's not quite certain, but at least written down in pen is the slightly over £19 million deficit gap that we're currently looking at. Obviously, it's one thing to say there's uncertainty, which is what you've just described, David. We've got multiple things that we don't know. In the various ways those different uncertainties could pan out, do you have a sense of the scope of how big or how small that £19 million might ultimately be?
Not at the moment. No, this is the gap generated by this draft budget with this level of uncertainty that David's just laid out. We have to see where all of that uncertainty lands before we can be sure.
Okay. Is there a scenario where it's zero?
Unlikely, I think.
Okay. I mean, that's not to be too political. That is obviously a bit different from what we were led to believe last year when we had 2 elections, and if people voted Labour, things would be better. And in fact, things seem to be worse.
Well, I really think it's, hypothetically, anything is possible. What you're seeing here is there are pressures in the budget. Now, normally, by this point, because we've had more confidence in our income, we would have proposed measures that would offset that, and we would balance the budget. Yeah, and that's normal. That's been the case all the time I've been here. There are inevitably pressures, and even with a constant funding level, and with the exception of UK SPF, this draft budget is based on an assumption that our government funding levels don't alter. It's the Mayor's budget guidance is very much business as usual, because we didn't know what was going to come. And so those elements of this budget gap that are part of, are just part of pressures that naturally arise in the course of life. Normally, we would have addressed them in the way that we have been doing year on year. It's just we haven't done at this point because we need to look holistically as we see what the figures are. So, it's not a case that you can say that, oh, well, this gap is because of the Labour government, because we've assumed the same basic approach in terms of council tax and business rates that we've assumed every year, because we just don't know what's going to come.
So you've assumed that there wouldn't be any more money under a Labour government, and the upshot of that assumption so far is £19 million gap.
So we've assumed that council tax and business rates would continue on in the way they have. Obviously, beyond that, and it doesn't tend to show because it doesn't fall neatly into the budget process, there are a range of things that will occur in year as we secure additional funding from the government for specific purposes, and you just don't tend to see that in the analysis at this stage, because a lot of that comes in flight in the year, or certainly in the couple of months before it.
And it's also worth bearing in mind, of course, as you recognise, Chair, that the figures we're looking at now are a partial point in time around a very small bit of the overall GLA group budget, so don't take into account the record funding levels that TfL have received from this government, or, for example, the record AHP settlement that we received, because that's effectively blind, because that's all ring-fence funding, so it's blind to the GLA revenue gap.
Yes. Although I suppose a member of the committee started to bring up bits that aren't outside the scope of this budget, you might say that's not really in the scope of this budget, Chair. But you anyway have just brought us something that's not in the scope of this. In terms of, so obviously at this stage in the budget, David, as you say, there's a lot of uncertainty, and we have at least 2 more budgets before we get to the final budget in February. So I suppose we will see where we are in February in terms of the final outturn and how much of your optimism about additional pots of money turns out to be true. Faye, thinking about the integrated settlement, which we're hoping for 26-27, what impact has that had on the way that the budget's being developed, this budget?
So as we've sort of developed the budget, we're thinking about the budget, I think in terms of integrated settlement, we understand and recognise the purpose of the integrated settlement is to increase devolution to those who can make the decisions best, i.e. in our case, making good decisions for Londoners. So as part of the process, we've been thinking about how we can influence that process as we develop the budget. But at this stage, we're actually at the stage at the moment of developing, understanding from the government what our final allocations will be for the integrated settlement and agreeing with them the outcomes from that. And so at the moment, in terms of the budget you're seeing in front of you, you haven't, there's sort of no clear impact of integrated settlement. We'll be bringing that in at the next phase of the process to set out for you a little bit more detail around that. What we are aiming to do is to ensure that the integrated settlement forms part of our sort of normal budget processes, so that the integrated settlement is integrated into the way that we think about our budget and we set our priorities. And so we're doing that thinking, but in terms of the numbers and in terms of the process, we're still at a bit of an early stage at the moment.
And when will the early stage become a middle stage or a late stage, do you think?
So there's kind of a few, in terms of the timetable, what's happening between now and the end of this year is the GLA is going through the readiness check. We're also having conversations with government around what that level of funding will look like and also what the outcomes are that are expected to be funded from that integrated settlement. So the thing I didn't mention before is that there's flexibilities within the integrated settlement. We're thinking about what, the integrated settlement is based on outcomes as opposed to in the same way before it was grants, very specific elements in terms of grants. So those outcomes are being agreed between now and the end of December. And then we'll get ready for it between January and April as an organisation. And then from the 1st of April, that's when the integrated settlement will kick in. But it's roundabout between now and the end of December that we shall have more information on what's in and what the outcomes expected are from that.
So the integrated settlement sort of final numbers and final details will have probably about the same time as the settlement numbers, i.e. like Christmas Eve or something?
We're not 100% sure, but we hope to have that. So at the moment in the budget, you'll see the ASF funding, which is a key, our biggest level of funding and expected to be within the integrated settlement. At the moment, our assumption in that budget pack that you've got in front of us is we've got the same level of funding as this year. And we don't actually have that information yet on what that level of funding will be. So that's the area that we've got a watching brief on.
OK, thanks. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This question is, to start with, to Phil Graham. How did you arrive at a figure of £10 million to mitigate the loss of £62.9 million in the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is assumed to be zero after March in 2026?
When the UK SPF was extended at the previous budget, there was only 1 year of additional funding, which was guaranteed, and while we hoped it would be extended further, we've known for some time it could end at the end of this year, and indeed, in contrast to the European funds which preceded it, UK SPF has only ever been allocated on a time-limited basis. For that reason, when allocating UK SPF funds throughout, we have always been clear that we couldn't rely on these in the long term. And so a lot of one-off capital projects and one-off business support grants were provided in the way in which we used that funding, with the exception of the funding for LNP's Grow London programmes, which were effectively a means of maintaining business support provision that had been previously provided under another name with European funding. So, this way of using the funding over a period of time to fund short-term grants and one-off projects isn't ideal, but it recognised the nature of the UK SPF funding. But it does mean that we haven't, for the most part, created a dependency on this funding, which will be pulled away if discussions around growth funding in the absence of UK SPF next year with government don't produce any additional income, as David has described. On that basis, we have simply been looking at what we think we could reasonably assume we could provide from within GLA core funds to replace that funding. And 62.9 million would be, more than a fifth, I think, of the GLA's core addressable revenue budget, which simply wouldn't be practical. 10 million pounds, we think, would allow us to mitigate, would be sufficient to mitigate the worst impacts of losing this funding, and particular to try and maintain at a reasonable level those business support programmes that L&P has been providing both via UK SPF funding and previously through European funding. These are successful projects. We are indicating that we would try and make that level of funding available to give L&P a degree of certainty. In the meantime, we continue to talk to government about their approach to growth funding in future. But I think even so, it wouldn't be quite enough to maintain them at their current levels. So, whatever we do, the loss of funding at this scale is going to cause some challenges.
Yes, and going back to the Chair's previous comments, I thought we were going to have absolutely everything if we ended up with a Labour government. So, David, when we talk about the loss of this UK SPF funding, what we're actually talking about is the Labour government's cutting of it, isn't it? So it hasn't actually been lost, it's been cut. So do you think cutting this is a mistake?
I think the Mayor's view would be that leaving the European Union and thus losing access to all the regeneration funds there was a mistake. Under both governments, the UK SPF has never been equivalent, as Phil said, to what we had before. And, we will, it is a loss that we feel, that European funding, and we're obviously engaging with the government to talk about economic growth and what support we need and what we can do. And I have more to say about that when we can.
So has the Mayor made his objections to these cuts clear? Because obviously it's less money coming in to London's businesses, etc.
So part of the awkward timing of this meeting is we are a week away from a budget and still clearly involved in negotiations about all of this. It is certainly fair to say that maintaining growth funding for London is a critical objective of those negotiations. We're not going to give a running commentary on those, but it is. But my point of view is that annual one-year pots of funding are not a good way of doing growth, and there are some flaws in the design of UK SPF that means there are better ways of giving that, of funding some of those projects for exactly the reasons that Phil set out. However, we are, it is critical for London that we maintain access to growth funding.
Absolutely right, especially with the last budget, and God knows what's coming in the next one. I fear for London's businesses. Mary, the previous government allocated £144 million to the UK SPF funding over the 3 years. What did that investment enable the GLA to do?
I'm going to ask Phil to answer that.
No, I'd
okay.
love you to answer it.
No,
please.
I don't have the detail. Phil has the detail.
I don't need real detail. It's a big fund. It was £144 million. You're our chief officer. I'd like your opinion.
Well, it's allowed us to underpin a number of projects related to growth and infrastructure across London, much of which has been deployed by the boroughs, as Phil has already indicated.
So what's your highlight? In what area was the best, do you think?
I don't have a view on that because I don't have the detail. If you're prepared to ask Phil the question, he'll give you the detail.
No, you're our chief officer. I wondered what stood out to you as wonderful, given that there was so much money. Well, all right then, Mary, but if the government has decided to cut this funding, what do you think that we won't be able to do anymore that you would wish that we could?
As Phil has already explained, much of the last £63 million, which is what we've had in this current year, we already knew would be one-off funding. So we have deployed that in a number of ways on mainly one-off capital projects across the boroughs, and as Phil has already indicated, a significant amount of that allocated to London and Partners work growing businesses in London, allowing them to grow both locally and globally. We are trying our best to find ways to protect that, what was 12 million in this year's budget, because we think that is the most crucial part of the work that the UK SPF is funding in this financial year.
Right. So, I mean, as the GLA's chief officer, have you made your concerns about the cut clear to government?
As Richard Watts has said, we are in constant dialogue with government. I mean, on our side, of course, we're in dialogue with the officials at MHCLG and in Treasury. We're all working together to see what we can do with government, the best deal for London.
Okay, and if we don't get that money, are you anticipating finding the money for London and Partners from somewhere else? Yeah.
So what we're saying in this budget, which again we'll reiterate again, you know, is draft and is in the context of some considerable uncertainty. What we are saying is that the money that has gone to London and Partners for the Grow Local and Grow Global programmes is the money we will do our best to protect going forward. It is a significant driver of that 19.2 million gap that you see in this budget. That's the one we are looking to protect. But we will have to find ways of protecting that from within our own resources if, and it's a big if, our financial situation stays as it is laid out in this budget.
Okay.
I think to add to Mary's answer on that, which is completely right. The reason why we wanted to guarantee this money to LNP now up front is because those projects in particular are dependent on some really expert, high caliber, high quality staff who we need to give LNP the confidence that they are able to not start processes over to lay off, which is why we wanted an early guarantee to LNP that that money would continue. Obviously, depending on where we get to with government on the question of how London's growth, clear need for growth funding will be met over the next few years, it gives us different tunes that we can play, and all of that will be reflected in different options we might have on budgets going forward. But the aim of this is to give Laura and the team at LNP certainty over enough funding that she doesn't have to start making like damaging and precipitative decisions at this point in a financial cycle to lose staff who will be extremely specialist and well qualified and would be very difficult to replace.
We must also remember that London and Partners was set up with the view to them being self-sufficient very many years ago, and there have been a massive drain on the budgets, 12 million a year. I'll pass back to you.
But if I may say, just to give you an example of the value of the work that these two projects do, I went to a dinner a couple of weeks ago that was effectively a speed dating session between...
Lovely. Speed dating.
Sadly not
for me. It's been years since I've been speed dating.
But for small businesses who have kind of established but not yet had the chance to grow, who've got massive growth potential, and venture capital funds and angel investors. And it was effectively a networking session for people to get that kind of contact into where private investment can grow. I think that's, it was really high caliber, really interesting for someone like me who doesn't see that kind of word very often. It just gives you an insight into the kind of value that those kind of specialist contacts can give. And frankly, for London's strategic authority, that kind of facilitation of securing private investment for high growth potential companies feels to me exactly the kind of thing that we should be supporting.
I'll pass back to you, Chair.
It sounds like, just on that, on the Shared Prosperity Fund, it sounds like you've described a scenario there, Richard, in which the government, which has been, let's say, even if they continue this funding in the budget next week, they've created enormous uncertainty, which the GLA has stepped in to try to mitigate in the way you've just described. But fundamentally, it's the government's fault that there's this uncertainty. You've talked about the merits previously for many years of longer-term settlements, clearer funding, visibility. And government could have done this last year in the previous budget, couldn't they? Or in the spending review. The whole point of the spending review is to give devolved government a bit more certainty. Don't you think the government should have done that? That would have then have avoided all this uncertainty that you're now trying to manage.
Well, I think that's a question for the government, really. My point, The whole point that there is such uncertainty this year is because next year will be the first year of what we hope will be a multi-year funding settlement that will give this. I mean, it's not unusual, I think, for a new government of any party coming in to effectively have a 1 year. I remember the same happened in 2010 and the same happened in 97, actually, of government effectively doing a 1 year holding budget to assess the state of the books and to understand where the choices are. And then, as this government has done, then a 3 year settlement that will kick in from the beginning of next year. What is a challenge for all of us, and it's a challenge under this government as much as it's been under previous ones of Labour, Liberal Democrat and Conservative ilk, is how late we get that information.
The budget document says there's never been more uncertainty than there is right now.
Because of the nature of all of the things that the government is trying to do to shift local government funding and finance all coming at once.
Sure. I can't help feeling, though, with the greatest respect, you might have found a bit more criticism of the previous government if they put you in this position than the new government, which for some reason you seem to be very willing to give them a lot of benefit of doubt about the way they mess us around.
The thing that's very interesting for me is that as we've watched the local government funding stuff play out, even those local authorities who are shown on the consultation documents to be major losers have accepted that this work and this reform is needed. We've gone through a period where, you know, we've probably been sat here in November saying, well, we don't know what the provisional settlements are going to say, but we can have reasonable confidence in them because the government hasn't begun the processes to do the sort of major review that is happening. Now this government has, you know, grasped that nettle and has really said, okay, you know, we have got to sort out local government funding, and, you know, that is a very big change thing. And it just happens that it's at the same time as the triennial valuation changes, and it's at the same time as they're also addressing some of the concerns that people have had from a business perspective about the business rate system, and tried to provide some certainty rather than the oscillating pattern of reliefs we've had, for instance, for retail, leisure and hospitality businesses. So definitely providing more certainty for businesses. When we get through this point, it's a 3-year deal, and so we will have great certainty. It's just we are at that point of uncertainty because the government is addressing so many of the things that have, you know, beach mutually not been addressed over the last 5 or so years.
I don't know that I would have picked retail, leisure and hospitality as business sectors that this government is helping. But Assemblymember Georgiou, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just very briefly, David, on what you've just said about some local government organisations accepting the need for change. Well, with the greatest respect, if you look at what London Councils has said, which is effectively the mouthpiece for Islington and the Islington and Camden Labour Party, you know, they say, no, this is all awful. We need to review the formula. This isn't what we want or what we're looking for. So I have to fundamentally disagree with you there. And on another point, David, just before you come in, I would say, I think to underline what Assemblymember Garrett said, since I've been here, since I've worked here, you know, since I've been aware of the GLA, for 14 years when we had a coalition government and a Conservative government, the language was Brexit this, austerity that, and all of these sorts of things. But now it's turned into, oh, it's mildly challenging. Oh, yes, we're still in conversations with the government. We're not entirely sure, but you know what? We appreciate they're in a tricky situation. The Mayor of London, and by extension you and Richard as his Chief of Staff and Deputy Chief of Staff, the Mayor of London has his own electoral mandate. So why can't you just say, yeah, we hate this process as much as we hated it the last times? It's not hard, is it?
So, taking your first point first, you misinterpret absolutely what I said. Clearly, people who are losers in the proposals will not be happy about the outcome. My point was that local authorities, even where they are in the draft consulted proposals shown as losers, recognise the need for the government to carry out local government funding reform. And that's what I said. On to your second point, you know, we are, as has been said, we are engaged with the government. We're having, you know, a level of engagement with the government at both political and official levels that we've never had before. Yeah, that is true. For the reasons I set out, there is the uncertainty at this point in time is greater than it has been. We know that as we come through this, we're then going to MHGLG settlement will give us 3 years of certainty, and that will be, something that we haven't had. I was reflecting, this is my 10th budget process I started. It was only the very first one of those in which we've had the multi-year settlement in place. And so this is a real positive thing. It is just inevitable, given the nature of the big challenges this government inherited, that the timescales that the budget processes work to, which, we have been critical. We've regularly, I think, been critical of the fact that the provisional settlement comes so late. We have supported the recommendations of the Hudson Review that was carried out under the previous government about when provisional settlements should be out. There is I understand why it's so late given everything the government is doing, but it is unhelpful, and I'm really pleased that we'll have a multi-year settlement so that we essentially will know the outcome of the provisional settlements before they're published for the next 2 years.
Thank you. Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the reminder on the UK SPF. And we were promised that everything would be rosy and the world would be a better place if we left the European Union during that Brexit debate. But it seems that we still have that uncertainty today on this funding. That did give us that certainty in the past through the European Union. So we'll be watching that tightly. And also, personally, I think I'm grateful to some of the funding through the UK SPF in Harrow, in my constituency, funded an upgrade to the Children's Library at North Harrow Community Library. So definitely making an impact in our local communities. First, I'm going to turn to Diane, and just some questions on the availability of space for the GLA and the proposals for the 55% increase in capacity at Palestra compared to existing provision at Union Street. So why have you chosen this level of capacity increase?
So the move to Palestra was always part of the GLA strategy. So the first thing is that to flag is that the Union Street lease is coming to an end. So we do need to relocate. So it was always part of our strategy that we would relocate and move to Palestra. This has been part of the GLA strategy, which is looking at group using property within the GLA group. So at the moment, Union Street is costing us in the region of around, the total contribution is around 8 million. And by using property within the group, we are saving that and keeping that money within the group itself. So that's been part of our strategy. In terms of space, we do know that space in Union Street is tight. The space in Palestra we are looking at is sort of partly limited by floor plate in terms of how much we can use. So we've opted for 1.5 floors, which is the optimum amount. It enables us to configure the space that we've got. It also enables us to look at ensuring hybrid working. So the space that we had at Union Street at the time was particularly during that COVID time, hadn't flagged the hybrid working element. So it does make sure that the staff commitment of working 2 to 3 days a week can be fully met. It gives us the opportunity to plan how we're going to use that space for the next 10 years. So it's sort of future planning what we are going to need as an organisation.
And just looking at the refurbishment costs, what do the refurbishment costs consist of?
So the refurbishment costs we haven't finalised yet because we've only just signed we're only just looking at the approvals through the mayoral direction. We do need to go out and to procure, so that's going out will be going out to tender. So we don't have final figures on the fit out and refurbishment costs at this stage.
But I can see that, so there's £2.9 million put aside for that refurbishment cost. Now, given that from the GLA's budget, essentially rent will be going to TfL,
correct.
Should TfL not be paying for the refurbishment costs to accommodate?
Well, no, because it's, to be honest, the money's all within the group anyway. So ultimately, we would have been anticipated doing refurbishment and fit-out costs. So the money ultimately is within the GLA group. So although we're not getting we're paying for the refurbishment costs, ultimately it remains within the GLA group, which is part of the group accommodation strategy.
Okay, and have you assessed sort of the impact on more usage of Palestra versus impact on usage here at City Hall?
Sorry.
So for meeting spaces or staff having the choice, obviously, to go between the two or work between the two, is there impact on this building?
No, there is no current impact on this building. What we are going to make sure is that as we're designing Union Street, we are thinking about the best way to use that space, and particularly in terms of meeting rooms and in terms of the number of desks as well. So we haven't finalised what that fit-out arrangement is going to look like. There will be space for Assembly members in Union Street, as there are in Palestra, as there are currently in Union Street.
And when do you think you'll be in a position to outline some of those more detailed proposals?
We're working on those as we speak, because we've got to go out. We're procuring at the moment suppliers to do the fit out and refurbishment. We do need to finalise figures. Our target remains to move by December next year. So we do need to we will have those by the end of this year.
Okay. I'm going to turn to Mary next on the pay award for 26-27. What stage are negotiations at with Unison at the moment?
So we have not started any negotiations yet for next year's pay award.
Okay, I've just seen in the budget, so you've budgeted for a 2.3% increase, is that correct?
We have put aside a sum of money, as you refer to, Assemblymember Harani. How that plays out in terms of an award to staff is clearly subject to the negotiation with Unison.
Sure. And what would a pay award cost that matches expected inflation rate in 26-27 roughly cost?
I don't know, but more than we have put aside.
Okay, yeah, because I've just seen
yes,
CPI.
I know that's the question you're wanting to get to.
Yeah,
but
so
yes,
CPI inflation is roughly about 3.8%. So, I mean, if you could work out those figures for yourselves, I think it would be great for you to have that in hand. And just looking at the budgeted pay award below inflation, what evaluations have you done of a below inflation pay award on staff?
So we, as I said, there are no negotiations happening at the moment, and I'm not going to be in a position to start those negotiations until we're more certain about our financial position. Okay. So I haven't started that work yet. You know, it's subject to the same uncertainty as everything else we're talking about this morning.
And it's just worth adding, Assembly member, that if you're talking about is provision for a pay award, is it above inflation, is it below inflation? Obviously, that depends on the relevant figure of inflation, and you would probably, I think, for a 26-27 pay award, be saying, well, what is the inflation figure at the start of 26-27, rather than what it happens to be at the moment. And when you look at the forecasts, they do show a forecast fall of inflation actually between the March figure and the April figure, and that probably has a material judgment on whether you say the money set aside is sufficient or not. And frankly, we probably just we have a period where we have other things to work through, as we've discussed, and hopefully that will then, as we come through that, give us a bit more certainty about the inflation forecasts and enable us to make final judgments about what money it's appropriate to set aside and support us in the right sort of discussions with Unison.
Okay. Have you considered any other ways of remunerating or awarding staff?
Well, each year, as I enter into discussions and negotiations with Unison colleagues, we have those types of discussions. We've made some changes in this pay award to some of the benefits available to staff, made changes to the sick pay benefits this year. We have those conversations each year as part of the negotiation.
Okay. And just the looking at the job families work, are you anticipating any impact on the budget or future budget as part of that as well?
No, we have budgeted already, as we had in previous years, for the impact of the job families work. So there's no further impact that we need to take into account.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Mahfouz.
Thank you. So we've heard already this morning we've got a £19.2 estimated £1 million budget gap for this year for the GLA in total. Last year, the total cost of the London Stadium was £19.5 million. We've got, on the other hand, West Ham, who are the obviously main tenants of that stadium, paying us a rent of £4.4 million a year. Although they have also spent about £70 million net during the summer transfer window. It is, quite frankly, a ball and chain 99-year lease, which was signed by the previous mayor, Boris Johnson, around the budget of Londoners that Londoners are having to pay for. Deanne, is it time that we released ourselves from this contract?
I think so. That's probably one for me, isn't it? The previous mayor, negotiated and signed, a contract that is, a bad financial deal for Londoners, and also, as it happens, it was a badly written contract. That contract doesn't provide any form of break clause, so it's a very long contract, and we are tied into it. It has various conditions in it. It's clearly properly regarded in an accountancy sense as an onerous contract because it is unavoidable to lose money on it. But that contract is there. The previous mayor signed it. We are duty bound to honour it. It is important to say the stadium is a real asset for London, and we want to get the best from that asset, and we want to work with all our partners, including West Ham, to do that. Clearly, if they or anybody else wants to come forward with proposals, those are things that we would consider and discuss with them. But the reality is, otherwise, we are operating within the contract that the previous mayor signed.
So would you say we're being hammered by it at the moment, then?
I see what you did there.
Just on the specifics with West Ham, actually. So clearly, unfortunately, they're not doing particularly well this season, and thankfully, I don't have Assemblymember Duval around the table to weep on that particular point. If they do go down, is there a clause within that onerous contract that suggests that they would be paying even less to rent that stadium?
Yes, that's right, Assemblymember. The contract broadly halves the rent that they would be paying in that circumstance. It's also worth understanding, of course, that there are 23 home games a season in the Championship versus 19 in the Premier League. And because the stadium loses money on each game it hosts, there's a bigger loss there. In addition, you have to look at some of the things that are uncertainties. There are risks to commercial income when, obviously the Premier League is more high profile and arguably prestigious than the Championship. And I say that as somebody whose team is just about hanging into the Championship at the moment. There's an uncertainty about the level of attendance that you would get at those games and what implications that has, either for stewarding costs or for catering income and things like that. So basically, West Ham's relegation would very broadly cost the taxpayer £2 to £2.5 million a year.
Wow. Okay. And so I guess we'll all be West Ham fans now, won't we? Encouraging them to stay up. Otherwise, it's going to cost us even more money. So that isn't currently factored into this budget. We are banking on West Ham staying up in the Premier League, then.
That's right. Of course, one of the things you get with the stadium in a variety of ways is that the football season year and the financial year are clearly not the same. We do carry some contingency both within the stadium budget and within the GLA budget, because there are a range of risks around an operating business like the stadium, which can depend on things like how many matches West Ham play in cup competitions and various commercial risks and opportunities. So we do have some provision, but it's clear that were West Ham to be relegated, then we would need to find additional support there. And just very pleased that they've won a couple of games recently, and long may that continue.
And so just super quickly then, I guess, are there any plans or opportunities within that onerous contract that you referred to there, David, where we can, within the near distant future, look to make a decision as to whether we sell or retain this asset or change the terms of that agreement?
So we do believe that the stadium is a positive asset for London, and we've, obviously Premier League football is very important in London, but beyond that, we've seen the great economic benefit of baseball and concerts and the other things we may be able to do. So we want to maximise the value we can get from the stadium as an asset. Clearly, if anybody, as we say, were to come to us with a proposal, we would obviously discuss that with them. At the moment, the stadium comes with this contract signed by the previous mayor, which is onerous and inevitably loss-making. And that clearly restricts the level of interest that there would be in the stadium. And so we focus on doing the best we can, driving down operating losses and looking to get the most from the asset. And we will see over time whether this is an opportunity that other partners want to be part of.
And just final question for myself. So where have we got to in terms of naming rights deal for the stadium?
So the position is that we're working on a range of commercial partnerships, some that we've been successful in, some that we have not. The naming rights market still does remain challenging. We're not the only major stadium in London that hasn't secured a naming rights partner yet. The team at the stadium continue to work hard on this and have discussions with potentially interested parties. Clearly, ultimately, any deal that is done has to work for the prospective sponsor, has to work for the stadium, and has to work for West Ham as well. And we continue to be open to approaches and continue to be proactively looking at opportunities. And obviously, when any such deal is reached, then we will obviously announce that and talk to the committee about the details and the implications.
Thank you.
Thanks. Assemblymember Wilson.
Thank you. Just picking up on the question of naming rights, and just wondering if a deal was to be agreed, what sort of financial contribution would you be looking for, and whether that compares to other Premier League clubs? I mean, from what I've managed to find out online, then Arsenal for the stadium alone, it's sort of between 4 and 6 million a year. Man City 15 million, Brighton and Hove Albion somewhere in the region of 8 million a year, Everton 10 million a year, Leicester 3 million a year, even little old Colchester, my team, mid-table in League Two, 200,000 a year. So clearly there is money to be gained from that, but what kind of level would we be looking for in a deal should one come forward for the London Stadium?
So, I mean, obviously I can't go into specific figures because they're about, that's very commercially sensitive and would be about the negotiation. I think a couple of things I would say is, firstly, speaking as a football fan, sometimes you look at some of these deals and think, well, actually, are they a back way of getting money into the club, where for various regulatory reasons, people try and push more money through a naming rights deal than they do other routes. And I know there are suspicions about that, which I won't name any clubs. Beyond that, you have to look at deals and say, well, right, what is the scope of the package? So Arsenal, for instance, you mentioned, when they moved, if my memory serves me right, yeah, as well as naming the stadium, there was shirt sponsorship at the same time. Right? How do you divide that down, the benefit of those two things? And yeah, similarly, sometimes you get training ground sponsorships thrown in and all sorts of other commercial things. And so really it becomes a question of, for a sponsor, you know, the questions about duration of deal, but also questions about which assets are they interested in securing in exchange. You know, are they looking for a box or two in the stadium? Are they looking to tie in with, you know, name it, whether it's on the front of the shirt sponsorship, on the sleeve, you know, training gear, whatever it is. Are they looking to put the name on the roof of the stadium? Are they looking for time on the LED displays? And they will have, any potential sponsor will have different things based on their own commercial interests, and obviously that would drive differences in income and also potentially differences in how that would split between ourselves and the football club. So yeah, there's no easy way to just put a simple number on it, but you know, it's right that if we're able to secure a deal, that would be of, you know, material financial benefit, because obviously that would be the reason for us undertaking it, because it's a very high profile asset and you know, we think has real value.
The Arsenal figure I quoted is just for the stadium. The shirt deal is much bigger than that. The Brighton figure includes the shirt. So yeah, you're not necessarily comparing like with like, and I get that. But if just on something else, you said a split between ourselves and the club. So if there was a deal, would the club still, you know, would they slice off part of that, or would the bulk of it come to us?
So it is complicated. There, and I don't have all the detail in front of me, so just at a high level, there are certain things set out within the concession agreement the previous mayor signed that are things that need to be, you know, made available to any sponsor. There are provisions around discussing the potential sponsor with West Ham. And there is always the potential that if a potential sponsor wants something that is a football club asset, then not a stadium asset under the terms of the concession agreement, then clearly, you know, some money from that, you know, would reasonably be due to the football club. As I think I said in answer to the first question, not only was the contract a bad deal, in places it's very badly written as well, and that makes this space more complicated than it need to be. And so we're obviously keen to work with West Ham as we, or even they, identify potential naming rights partners. And yeah, as I say, any deal has to work for that partner, has to work for the stadium, and has to work for the football club.
Sounds quite complicated, but absolutely worth pursuing, and something that I think we'd all want to see happen at some point.
Absolutely, spot on.
It'd be fair to say that question has been asked many times over many years, but I'm sure we're closer to a resolution now than we ever have been before, just through pure logic. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. 2 quick points. Firstly, the naming rights. Assemblymember Desai and I have been asking this question on naming rights now for at least 7 years, and we're constantly told it's complicated. I accept it's complicated. But 7 years down the line, I really think it should have been dealt with by now. It's pretty poor. With regard to the contract, I agree. It does sound as if it's a pretty diabolical contract. Can you absolutely confirm to me and assure me that no officer that would have been advising Mayor Johnson at the time is working for us still?
So I think, yeah, on your first point, we're all keen to see naming rights, but yeah, we need, as I say, we need a partner to come forward and a deal to be doable that works for all three, and we're not there yet. It will be a happy day when we are. On the second point, it's hard for me to answer questions about who was advising the previous mayor, because obviously I wasn't here to witness that. What I would say is that I don't believe there are any members of the board of LLDC, because obviously the stadium was part of LLDC at that time. I don't believe there are any members of the board who are still there. I don't believe, clearly There have been a couple of changes, probably of chief executive in that time. Clearly, there have been changes in all the senior GLA officers looking around the table weren't here then, and clearly, there've been none of the mayoral advisors who would have been involved are here either. So I see no reason to think that there's anybody who would have been involved in those discussions, some of which my understanding is were quite kind of closed between the mayor and some of the leadership at West Ham. I've no reason to think any of those officers are still working and advising us.
Will you look into this? Because you constantly say, and I accept that this was a very bad contract. And we must always remember, and I'm so sure that Sadiq Khan would also say this, they don't make their decisions without having very highly paid, very highly specialist officers giving them advice. So if this contract is as bad as it would appear, and certainly as you've always said it is, David, can you please investigate and make sure that nobody that's still working for the GLA was partly responsible for asking the Mayor Johnson to sign that contract?
Well, obviously, short of the previous mayor telling me who advised him, I don't see him do that. As I say, from my knowledge of all the officers who could have been involved, I'm satisfied that they're no longer here. We have also, remember, the current mayor commissioned Moore Stephens to do an independent forensic look at the whole end-to-end situation, because the situation with the stadium, it's important to remember, is not just about the operating deal that we have with West Ham. It's also about the decision to convert the stadium from what was meant to be
I think
a
we all know
temporary
this,
athletic
David.
stadium into a football stadium,
I think,
which has landed us with over £350 million of debt.
Yeah, so can you just look into that for us? I'm just trying to cut time down a bit, David.
Well, as I say, I have no reason, I could easily just say yes and we move on, but it would be pointless because I have no reason to think that any officer involved is still here. Because I think round, as I sit here, all the officers, who could have been involved in that, like the roles, and
you might want to check.
Who were not here on day one when I walked in.
You might want to check.
I'm confident in my position there.
Well, I love it. I love it when people are confident. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. I'm also confident that that's not the only stadium we have. Of course, there was another stadium down in Crystal Palace, not quite in my constituency, but very close. Deanne, that's about to go into planning, and obviously with a very exciting renovation project to bring that National Sports Centre back into use in Crystal Palace. As we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, there's pressure on the GLA budget, and while the big capital renovation project is going on, can we be confident that the revenue cost of maintaining that sits on our budget isn't going to be a line that someone is looking at with a red pen to put that project in jeopardy?
So we've talked a lot about uncertainty in this meeting, but this is a thing you'll be pleased now I can give you some certainty on, which is we are now in contract with Morgan Sindall for the renovations for Crystal Palace National Sports Centre, and we are clearly intending to and obligated to meet with our contractual commitments. So the renovation budget for the sports centre is safe and secure.
Brilliant.
In terms of the kind of revenue budget for the running of the centre, at the moment, we are making changes with GLL all the time. There's a kind of constant improvement process in our management of GLL and their maintenance of that contract. That will clearly go up and down a bit anyway as the centre goes through the renovation process, because clearly some bits of it won't be usable as construction works are carried on around that. So that will inevitably be a bit of a movable feast, and we would always want value for the taxpayer and all of that. The thing I would say is at the moment, because of the kind of early improvement capital investments we've made in both the stadium and the sports centre, that at the moment, users of the gym, which is actually the money maker as it stands at the moment, are going up, and the bit of kind of sense of progress and life there is around that whole building compared to a few years ago is actually generating that kind of momentum and actually increasing users and increasing revenues.
No, I agree, it's a positive story. I just wanted to make sure that the revenue pressure wasn't putting the project at risk. Good. Okay. That brings us to the end of that section. And in fact, before we move on to the next section, I would just like to welcome to our public gallery, hello there, students from Year 5 at Christchurch Primary School in Redbridge. Welcome to the London Assembly, the Budget Performance Committee. We are now moving on to some questions from Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, panel. Faye, how has the adoption of delivery plans impacted the GLA Mayor budget process?
So as those delivery plans have been developed, as you know, you've seen them sort of published over this sort of last few months or so. What's happened is the Mayor's office has worked with officers to think about what those priorities are, and what you've seen in that through that process is that we'll have moved a bit of money around to influence or reflect our strategic priorities. So that's kind of in terms of the process element of it. And then we've pulled it together in the budget in this budget, so you'll see that each of the delivery plans are clearly set out, including the resources against each of those delivery plans. And again, they'll be refreshed again in the next version in March, where we've got a complete published set of delivery plans, where we'll have a clear strategic direction as an organisation built from those plans in terms of our priorities. And in terms of the budget process, obviously our aim is to prioritise those resources against those strategic priorities. So that's particularly how it's influencing our thinking on how we work through the budget.
Thank you, Faye. And David, have you identified any activities that will be discontinued as a result of the adoption of mandates and delivery plans?
This is one for me, Zach.
Sure. Sorry, Richard.
So clearly, we're not in a position in this meeting, for reasons I think we all understand, to talk about any kind of budget decisions for activities that may be discontinued in future. In terms of what we've already done, so decisions we have made over the course of this financial year around activities that we've stopped as a result of introducing the delivery plans. I mean, there have been a few, yes, and the money have been kind of reallocated within programmes, and actually some projects have been moved between programmes depending on where they have both fitted as well, which is why you've seen a bit of shift between what was kind of predicted at the start of this year and actually where we think we are now in terms of the financial tables by programme in the budget. I'm trying to think of an example of one of those, and I'm going to struggle off the top of my head,
Food.
but a colleague may want to come in if they can think of one, sorry.
I was going to ask about food, actually, so that being an example of where you've redeployed. How are you making sure that there's still consistency of delivery when you're moving pots of money around and it's not necessarily clear where the responsibility lies?
So it's moved around in the sense of what programme budget it sits in, but it hasn't moved around in the sense of which officers are running it and what the accountability processes are for that. So it's actually, you know, that isn't our biggest problem. What I think we are finding is the process of the MDB committees, you know, we've, I think, just published now for this committee on oversight to look at the first round of quarterly performance papers as a kind of draft, as a first go at running those out. So we are finding a kind of greater certainty and greater strategic clarity that the delivery plan process has given us useful, and that is allowing us to kind of be more accountable, I think, to you and to Londoners for how we are performing against all of those. The thing I would also say, though, and I think myself, Mary, Faye, David, as the people who've been leading the kind of work across all of this, would all accept this has taken longer than we would have hoped, and we'd hoped to have been in a position where all of them would have been published as of today. I think the last few will be published shortly, but all of this has taken longer than we would have hoped.
Thank you. And on that issue of accountability, you've said today is not the day to announce what things are being discontinued. And what is that day, and how much clarity will there be about those programmes?
So that goes back to the briefing that Mary and Faye gave to group leads in private a week ago, which is what we've talked about is both for once we've properly understood what the gap actually is, and therefore what the scope of the changes we will need to make, which will be like in the group budget process, either at that point or in the time preceding after that, before the end of the financial year, is the point where we'll come forward with proposals that will close that gap. I think that proposals will also want to further look to put budget behind projects that are really working. Now we have that greater understanding of what's actually delivering and what isn't.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. I think that takes to the end of that section. We now move on to looking at the London Growth Plan. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. David, what is included in the 26-27 budget to increase the level of productivity targeted in the London Growth Plan?
I'm going to switch that to Phil, who's the lead officer for this.
Well, we are, first of all, you need to look at what we think some of the barriers to productivity growth over recent years have been, and as the growth plan makes clear, those are some of the most significant barriers around infrastructure, skills, housing. So there are significant, and we have secured significant long-term funding packages around transport infrastructure and around housing. There is obviously continuing investment in skills through the Adult Skills Fund and other routes. We're also, as we were discussing with Assembly Member Hall earlier, seeking to protect the high growth and small business support programmes that L&P provide. The high growth programmes have already brought in around 300 million in terms of GVA for London in the first half of this year. So, those are programmes that are important for our productivity. We're continuing to support Opportunity London, who are bringing in significant investment into London's built environment and into commercial development. And we continue to work with creative industries organisations, with the life sciences sector. London has recently become the #2 city in the world for life sciences. There are challenges around the loss of UK SPF, but we are seeking to ensure that funding across a wide range of programmes is in place that both tackles barriers to productivity and also provides access to finance and access to support for some of our growing companies.
Yeah, I will have to agree to disagree on LNP. I don't think they've raised a penny and done anything good for London, but that's by the by. Phil, as a follow-up, I appreciate a lot of the caveats that you've said. Mind you, all the things you've mentioned are what the Mayor of London's been responsible for the last 9 years, and no wonder why it hasn't happened. But is there a targeted level of productivity growth for 26-27? Obviously, the government has their own views on these things and what the productivity rate should be. Have we sort of allocated an improvement in that rate, or a target, I should say?
We've set a target for productivity growth in the London Growth Plan. We haven't broken that down into a year-by-year annual trajectory at this stage, but we're well aware of the long-term target to get productivity growth back up to the levels that we saw prior to the 2008 crash, which would have a significant impact on prosperity for Londoners and on growth in the capital as a whole.
So surely then, wouldn't it be a case of taking what the Mayor has said in the London Growth Plan and just replicating it within the budget setting process?
Well, that is what we are doing as far as possible, and as I said, a lot of the growth plan includes measures to support business. The growth plan includes measures to drive up skills and address skills barriers. The growth plan includes measures to improve investment in our built environment and in infrastructure, and all of that is built into the budget. But of course, the Mayor does have a whole range of other responsibilities and other priorities, and this budget process, as in any year's budget process, is an exercise in working out how you can achieve the best balance in line with everything the Mayor is trying to achieve.
Thank you. Phil, I appreciate it is highly unlikely you're going to want to answer my next question. I assume it will be David or Richard. How has the government's £40 billion of tax hikes and last year's budget, with more misery to come next week, impacted the rate of growth the Mayor is expecting from London?
Well, I'm sure Richard will come in on the majority of this, but the only thing I would say briefly is that the latest growth figures that we have are only for Q1 2025, but those show the highest quarterly rate of growth in London since the spike when we were coming out of the pandemic. So, you can't read too much into any single quarter's growth, but the trend appears to be in the right direction rather than the wrong direction.
So, sorry, just before you come in, Richard, then, I appreciate it. Don't worry, I will come back to you, Richard. You've mentioned one quarter of growth. What about the previous quarters from the last budget?
Pardon me. We had about, so 2023, we saw GVA growth in London was about 0.3%. 2024, it was about 1.1%. Q1 2025 was about 0.7% for the quarter. So the trajectory is in the right direction.
Right. The problem is, though, looking at it quarterly, and I appreciate there's no other way of looking at it, you know, the date range that you've provided, so from 2023 essentially to date, is effectively cross-cuts various budgets, various actions. And as we all know, sometimes there's a lag effect on some of the brilliant things that Rishi Rishi did when he was Prime Minister. But I appreciate, Richard, that you want to come in. Thank you, Phil.
So, without turning this into an episode of Mayor's Question Time, I think the
you'd make a one. Yeah, go for it, Richard. Next time.
I am happy to say my days as an elected politician are well behind me, but I wish you all the best of luck in carrying on. So, look. Tax rises on, talking to representatives of businesses like the hospitality sector and other stuff like that, they are very clear about the impact of those tax rises. And I wouldn't want to disguise for a second the kind of genuine concern that business leaders in London have about the impact of all of that. I think clearly we are doing what we can to support business, and that example about how, for example, we're supporting high growth, high potential further growth companies in London at the speed dating session, which, I don't want to start another round of kind of carry-on style bawdy banter about, but I think is an example of exactly the kind of thing that London and that we should be doing as a strategic authority. And I do want to, if I may, respectfully, gently push back on your assertion about LNP, who I think are one of the highest performing organisations that we work with. Their work, for example, in bringing all the boroughs across party together to develop the London Growth Plan, which they did in the last year, was exemplary. It is the document, I think, with the highest level of buy-in across party, across all of London government of any I've ever known. Their work on those growth, those kind of small business support and high growth sectors is genuinely excellent. The reason we fund them is they provide genuinely excellent value for money. I appreciate the Assembly has had a kind of scepticism about LNP for a while, but I would very gently say that I don't think that's evidence-based.
No, appreciate that we mildly deviate on the efficacy of LNP. Phil, again, the Mayor's manifesto targets creating more than 150,000 good jobs by 2028 and increasing living standards for Londoners. What is the progress against this target, and what good jobs will be created through the 26-27 budget?
So officers are currently developing a framework to monitor progress against this target. So we will be able to share more detail on how we're going to monitor it and where we are exactly in that process over the coming months. It is important to say that the target related to the delivery of the London Growth Plan. So it is a target around the creation of jobs by all tiers of London government and by businesses across the capital. But we're confident that, through that cross-London working, we will achieve the target. And for the GLA's part, our inward investment activity, our investment in housing, our work to secure wider investment in the built environment I mentioned earlier, our support for the creative industries, our green finance work, and our work to support retrofit across London's housing stock is all helping to create jobs. For example, our investment over recent years in the capital's creative and cultural industries is helping to create, we think, over a period of time, around 42,000 jobs in film and TV crew employment opportunities. So, alongside that, we know that major employers, including Apple, Microsoft, Salesforce, are expanding in London, and our work on frontier innovation through LNP and through MedCity is in line with that. So we expect to see new jobs created through a wide range of the programmes within the budget and within the London Growth Plan. Borough activity, private sector activity will supplement that. And of course, the inclusive talent strategy is which has recently been published, is going to set out how we can ensure that Londoners can benefit from those opportunities.
I've got a couple of, just very quickly, without triggering Assembly Member Hall, what is an inclusive talent strategy? What does that mean? Aren't all talent strategies inclusive of everyone?
That's a good question. The reason it's called the Inclusive Talent Strategy is because a major part of it will be looking at the data that shows which Londoners are disproportionately further from the jobs market, and making sure that we put in additional support so that everybody gets equal opportunity to the growth that Phil was talking about. So we know statistically that black, Bangladeshi and Pakistani Londoners are more underemployed. There's various other groups, young people. We know that we have a higher rate of economic inactivity in London. So this was jointly created by us and the London councils and partners. So it isn't the GLA's Inclusive Talent Strategy, it's London's Inclusive Talent Strategy. And all partners felt strongly that we'll try and do something a bit different in London in order to serve all Londoners.
I think it's also worth saying, and it goes back to your productivity question, which is a fair one, if I may say, the core insight from the core insight in the growth plan, and effectively what is a development, and maybe even a shift in our economic strategy, is to recognise you're never going to get all sectors of the economy to be equally productive. That the nature of the UK economy, the nature of kind of advanced economies across Europe and North America, is that we are seeing with technology and kind of shifting working patterns, productivity in some sectors rapidly outpacing productivity in the everyday economy. And that the quality of jobs in those high productive sectors, even for people at entry-level jobs, even for a cleaner at Google gets paid a lot more than a cleaner in a nail bar in a high street shop, for example, is such that what we need to try to do isn't to level up across our economy. It's to deliberately try to move more Londoners into jobs in the productive sectors where they are more likely to get high paid jobs, they're more likely to have productive careers, and even where there are not kind of career opportunities for them, they are more likely just to earn like a proper living wage. And I think that is a clear shift, and it goes into the investments we are making in some things like the GROW programmes, but also sort of the wider implementation of the growth plans it rolls out, which is a deliberate move to start prioritising investment and economy growth in those more productive economic sectors that the growth plan sets out.
Thank you. And then final question for me. Now, this should be a relatively simple answer, I hope, David and Richard. Now, we know that the Chancellor in the last budget made life more difficult, and this isn't as you've already alluded to, Richard. Businesses have already said that it's become increasingly difficult on a financial level to do business, not just in London but across the country. So we've had the NI increase, and I'm not asking you to speculate about what we think is going to be in the budget, but we know there's going to be a business rates reviews where we know we're going to have a lot of losers and a lot of winners, which I think are going to balance each other out. We're likely to get a corporation tax increase. CGT is likely to go up. So my question is, I'm not asking you to speculate on whether you support or oppose these policies. Assemblymember Polanski, that's his wish list, by the way, all these things. Have you modelled how this could possibly impact not just London's businesses and our growth plans, but also the impact on the GLA's finances? Because obviously the more businesses you have leave, that impacts business rates and footfall and inward investment. So have we done any modelling on this, or is it something you're going to do after the fact if and when it happens?
So I think the first thing I would say is, as with the previous budget, as with this one, clearly the Chancellor has a range of choices. She made choices a year ago based on the situation at the time that she inherited.
I'm sorry, David, we're not debating. This isn't a debate. I'm just asking if you modelled it. I'm not having an ideological discussion as to what you think is right or wrong. Just what
I'd be in that if you'd let me finish my answer, please.
Well,
she had to make those choices, and so the question about modelling is, well, the Chancellor always has a range of choices. We can't know which they're going to be. And can you model to try and predict, well, if you do this, this is what will happen to the economy? And I think what we'd say, we have a very good GLA economics team, but it is incredibly difficult to do that because there are, so many different variables and levers that a Chancellor could choose to pull or not pull. B, in any case, it's much part of a much wider economy with people taking decisions about investment and other things, sometimes impacted by government decisions, sometimes not. And thirdly, I think an important thing to say for this committee is that all the changes to the business rate system that you rightly referred to create uncertainty, I think, for us, because remember, the amount of money that we will ultimately assume in the budget we are going to get from business rates, which is really the issue here, is determined by the forecasts made by the CFOs in the billing authorities and their assessment of how all that will play out. Now, it is, we have, and I've said this before to this committee probably most years, we await those figures at the end of January, and we never know in advance how they're going to turn out. And this year, with all the changes that are happening we've discussed, we really don't know. So trying to do uncertain economic modelling, given the factors I set out, on top of the uncertainty we have about billing authority projections, it would be a nice thing if we could do it, but sadly it can't be done with any level of certainty. And that's why we take an appropriately prudent approach at group level in our allocations of business rates, and why we hold a reserve to back us up if any risks materialise, as obviously they did at the start of the pandemic.
David, I must admit then, in that case, I find it staggering that you seem to not be able to manage or model very basic taxes, but yet you can model the Mayor making up a number about 150,000 jobs that he's going to allegedly create, which aren't real jobs, quite frankly, when the Mayor's involved. You can say that productivity is going to increase because of what the Mayor is doing and saying. Londoners will have a certain level of average income over the growth plan period. So how is it your office or the GLA economics team can manage to do all of the London and partners, and that's why I don't believe the numbers, but how is it they can manage to do that, but you can't model out income, tax increases that we've had before, NI, CGT, corporation tax, and how that impacts the tax base in London?
I think that's a question, like, I did A-level economics, it's a little while ago now. Yeah. I think that's a question that's best directed probably to an economics professor. The scale and complexity of a modern open economy clearly, and the range of actors, the range of uncertainty there is, means there is such a huge range of different forecasts and uncertainty. We see that from the city when you see forecasts about what specific figures, whether it's growth or inflation or jobs, are going to be. And these are people who invest very considerable sums in their economic modelling and have access to capacity that realistically the GLA is never going to be able to afford. And even then, not being critical of them, they get it wrong most of the time. It is an incredibly complicated dynamic system that you're asking us to model. And as I say, even if we could do so with any degree of accuracy, which nobody seems to be able to manage, to be honest, then that's not really the exam question. The exam question is actually ultimately about the judgments that borough treasurers are making in terms of what's happening, because it's that tells us what money we're going to actually receive from them.
Okay, we now move on to a section on looking at Oxford Street, and because we're all about the politics of hope on this committee, let me let you know that at the end of that section we'll be having a short comfort break. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This is a question for Phil, I think. What's the estimated full cost of the Oxford Street project, and when is it anticipated to be delivered?
In terms of, it depends what you mean by the full cost of the Oxford Street project. I mean, we have always said we would intend to deliver Oxford Street in 3 phases. The initial phase, which is what we're working on at the moment, from Oxford Circus, broadly speaking, to Selfridges, to a street called Orchard Street, and then Orchard Street to Marble Arch, secondly, and Oxford Circus back to Tottenham Court Road as the 3rd phase of the project. We haven't, at this stage, costed the 2nd and 3rd phases of that work. We have an estimate for the capital costs of the 1st phase, which I think we've discussed with the Assembly before, of 150 million, which is based on looking at the cost estimates that were required, that we came up with, that were developed when the Mayor first proposed the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street some years ago, and looking both at the extent to which those were consistent with what might be proposed here, and the extent to which they needed to be uprated for construction cost inflation and so on. And that has led to the estimated cost of 150 million for those works. We are, as I think Assembly members are aware, alongside that, developing a budget for the operational costs of the Mayoral Development Corporation, which is being established at the moment. And we have said we will publish the budget for that. It's treated as a separate part of the GLA group, and so the budget for that will be published over the next couple of months alongside other GLA group organisations.
Okay, so we've got 150 million for phase 1.
Yeah.
Phase 2 and phase 3 as yet completely unknown.
At this stage, we haven't undertaken the works to estimate those costs.
Okay, thank you. And how are we going to be funding phase 1?
Well, that's part of the work that clearly is going to be undertaken by the new chair, who has recently been appointed, and the new chief executive. We expect the works to be the project to be funded from a range of sources. Some of that may be GLA funding. We are looking at philanthropic income. We're looking at the commercial revenue that the transformed street could generate. And we're talking to businesses along the street. Alongside that, there will, of course, as it becomes a planning authority, be Section 106 income, potentially planning fees and so on. I mean, like all of our MDCs, ultimately they need to generate income, and that needs to form part of the overall funding package.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned you're setting the company up. When do you expect to be able to publish the full business case for Oxford Street, either for phase 1 or for the whole shebang?
We will be publishing the budget for the Mayoral Development Corporation over the next couple of months. I think the development of the full business case will be an early priority for the MDC's new chair and chief executive once they are in place.
Okay. And you mentioned looking for private investment. Are we even anyway down the road on that yet, or are we waiting for the development company to be set up before we start that particular line of work?
We have been doing some early work on working with TfL, drawing upon what they have done on Oxford Street around the potential for commercial income, but it's really at an early stage because it will be as the designs for the scheme are developed, and as we understand and as we begin to assess through that design the scope for events and activations, for commercial partnerships, for advertising, that we will be able to get to a clearer figure.
Thank you. And possibly one for either Richard or David. This one is it's more of a political angle. What contingency arrangements have you got in place, or will you have in place if the suggested private investment doesn't materialise, and we have to be funding far more of this out of the public purse.
So I guess there's two things to say there. The first is just to be clear that, because we're here talking about the GLA Mayor budget today, Oxford Street is not, it has been in the current year, but Oxford Street is not in it in future. The second thing to say is that any capital investment can be funded from a range of sources, and where that might need borrowing, that can only be done in accordance with the Prudential Code, which means we need to take a prudent approach and have that reasonable certainty that we will be able to do that. And that's the same as whether it's Oxford Street or it's a transport scheme or it's the works at Crystal Palace. Whatever we may do on the capital side, we will only borrow for it where we have, we can clearly say, and ultimately Faye as CFO can sign off that it's a prudent thing to do.
So theoretically, we could find that there's very little coming in from the private sector. We could then look about whether we want to fund this through borrowing, so it's purely public money. And at that stage, you might decide not to do it at all because the business case doesn't stack up.
So we have confidence that there are income streams here that the Development Corporation can capture and that can support both direct investment and repayment of borrowing, because obviously sometimes you need to do the work in order to generate the upside. Yeah, so we absolutely do have confidence. I think it's absolutely right that the Development Corporation, when it exists, will need to set out its business case and its plan. Clearly, we wouldn't undertake any borrowing without having that appropriate level of confidence to do so for the reasons I've set out. But as I say, we are optimistic that, and I think we saw, some early signs of benefit from the day that was held in September. We are optimistic that absolutely there are income streams there to grasp, and all that will be looked at carefully as plans are put together.
And just in addition to that, look, clearly, I think it's worth us all being very clear at the beginning that this whole scheme remains subject to one further consultation that will come out on the traffic and transportation changes that will come out in very short order indeed, where Londoners have already been given a chance to comment on their principal support for the scheme, where the Londoners overwhelmingly supported it, as they've previously done through kind of any opinion polling that we have seen on this. So we know the Mayor has the backing of the majority of Londoners for the principles.
They responded.
But also in representative opinion polls as well. The picture of about 2/3 of Londoners backing this is pretty consistent, however you measure it. What we are now about to start is a consultation on the detailed traffic and transportation changes that go with that, the changes to bus routes, the changes to some of the side roads, and that kind of stuff. And clearly the Mayor will take into account Londoners' views on that where will meaningfully impact the design. We are now in contract with designers, but it's been written into that contract that the scope of works will change depending on what the result of that consultation is. And once we have a final design, you will have a final cost. But at the same time, we are simultaneously working on ways of raising money for that, and there will be changes in both from anything from the quality of materials to the scope of some of the wider enabling works as well. That will be a bit dependent on how much there is cost. I think your scenario of there being very small amounts, small to zero amounts of private contribution, though, I think is vanishingly unlikely. I mean,
we have to bake these things in.
But possible, but vanishingly unlikely. So I think the Mayor has been very clear that with the support of Londoners and with taking into account the results of the next set of consultations, he will push ahead with this. But there's clearly a lot of work still to do on the precise details of how that goes on, and that ties into the funding patterns as well. Part of that is about how much private capital we can raise, and there's a clear incentive for businesses on the street who will clearly benefit from this, contributing some of that private benefit into the public good of the scheme.
Okay, just going back to the 150 million then. So how confident are we? Because given, I mean, Westminster tried to do something similar, a more modest scheme, and they were looking at more about 232 million for their gig. And are we confident on 150 million?
I mean, it's worth saying the Westminster scheme was a much wider scheme that looked at on Oxford Street, or much wider bits of Oxford Street and many of the surrounding roads as well. So you're not quite comparing apples with apples with apples on that one. However, I think they had also been involved in conversations that, because of the constructive working relationship we've developed with Westminster, that we can pick up with some of the companies who were looking at some funding for that, which is one of the reasons why I think your scenario, very small amounts of private support, is vanishingly unlikely.
Yep.
I think, there is a trade. There's an iterative process of budget setting in all of this, isn't it? Where if you design like gold paving and stuff like that, the budget will be bigger. There's a basic good quality scheme that will massively improve Oxford Street as both a place for Londoners to be and as a place for Londoners to spend time, and therefore will improve business conditions on the street. We are confident you can deliver for a sum around that amount of money, dependent on design details and if there's any kind of shocks that come from the kind of physical condition of the street we inherited, which I think, again, feels from now what we know, having been highway authority of the street for 6 weeks or so, feels, again, that those risks are rapidly diminishing. There's no shocks we've found so far. So you can change the scheme to suit the budget to a degree, but we also want to send a very clear message to business that the more they put in, the better it will be.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Assembly Member Baker.
Thank you. Yes, we've on Oxford Street as well. We've talked about it a lot, but I do just want to do one further follow-up. Just to say, obviously, Londoners as a whole do really want this to happen. I think you're right that there is huge potential for private investment. I suppose my concern is that private investment, knowing that the GLA has this underwritten effectively, may somewhat weaken your hand, but let's see how this all plays out over the next few months. But what I am concerned about is, given this is a big project for the GLA, and it will benefit the businesses that are around Oxford Street, how is it going to benefit Londoners who work around or maybe getting jobs there? What's the calculation in terms of the Good Work Standard and London Living Wage, and how we can embed those more so that investment that we're putting in actually, helps Londoners who are working as well?
So forgive me. With the highway authority for the road itself, we don't own the buildings or the businesses, so we have influence, but we don't have power in those situations.
But you're going into negotiations.
So
this is it. You're going into negotiations about trying to get money to improve the area. What part of that is going to be ensuring that working on Oxford Street is also better, as well as it being a nicer place to be?
So everyone benefits, staff as well as visitors, from it being a nicer place to be, being a safer place to walk around, there being less chance of traffic accidents, of which there have been quite a number in the last few years, and there being a better business environment on the street. Put simply, Ellie, businesses that do better pay better wages and take on more staff. And we need to be very clear that the business condition, and while we will also use the fact that we are making this public investment into that area and that will improve business, to then exactly have those negotiations with people around living wage, about mayor's business support, and that's exactly the kind of conversations we'd expect the MDC to be having with businesses. But the scheme, as we try to work it through, part of that clearly depends. The ability for us to do extras over and above a core good scheme will depend on, to a degree, on private funding. The Mayor has underwritten this scheme. The Mayor has said, subject to Londoners' support, it will happen, and subject to Londoners' support, it will. But what businesses can do is, put frankly, the more you put in, the more say you have on some of this kind of stuff, particularly in what you want to see outside your business and how and given the MDC will become the planning authority as well, how your business premises will move into what will rapidly stop feeling like a street and start feeling like a new public space. And the integration between the business and the street, I think, becomes quite important in all of that as well. So I think there's lots of opportunities for us to influence business. I think there are lots of opportunities for us to talk to business about the extra value that they will get from putting some money in as well.
I will wish you all the best on that. Just say that it has been clear that it's an economic scheme, not a transport one, much as I'm interested obviously in the transport impacts. So the economic benefits and how they spread out should be part of it. I would also, apologies, disagree that businesses that make more money always then pay better. And I think you can probably see the flaw in that assertion pretty quickly. So back to you, sir.
Thanks very much. That brings us to the end of that section and the first half of our meeting. So by my watch, it's now 11:40. So we'll have a short 5-minute adjournment and return at 11:45. Thanks, everyone. Hello and welcome back to this morning's meeting of the London Assembly Budget Performance Committee. We now move on to section on reducing inequalities. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Tunde, this is for you. Why is reducing inequalities expenditure expected to fall by nearly 20% over the next 2 years?
So we haven't had a reducing inequalities programme before. We didn't lay it out in the budget that way. So if you could just point me to the part that you're referring to, I might be able to explain.
Well, no, I've got that. We are told that the Reducing Inequalities programme consists of revenue expenditure of 13.5 million for 2026-27, and of course it's not got no capital expenditure there.
I think it's worth saying, Assembly Member, just while Tunde finds the right bit in the thing, that obviously what I think you're referring to is basically what this year's budget we discussed at this time last year says, because there were no change, because we've already said all the way through that nothing in those existing tables is a new proposition. All of this, like we've talked about this time last year.
Well, perhaps the 13.5 million will give a clue as to the programme I'm referring to today.
Sure, yes, I found the figures. So you are looking, I'm assuming you're looking at the 3-year projection. So according to my figures, for next financial year and the financial year after that, it's at 13 million. And then for the financial year 27-28, it drops to 11.5.
Yes. Well, so what do you call that programme then?
So that's the Reducing Inequalities programme. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Sorry, you just said it wasn't. There wasn't such a thing. There
wasn't last year, because it's only been mandated that we have a programme called Reducing Inequalities.
Have I got the wrong person? Should somebody else? Who's in charge of this budget?
I am in charge of the budget. So if you let me finish. I understood your question as being, why has it dropped from last year? Last year there wasn't a Reducing Inequalities budget programme, so I couldn't answer in those terms. If we're talking about the projection over the next 3 years, why does the last year fall?
Shall I read you the question again?
You can if you want to. I think I understand it, but yeah, please do.
No, if you really
help me.
understand it, that's fine.
Can I help?
No, but I think Tunde should be answering this.
I was just going to point you everybody to the relevant page so that we're all on the same page and we talk about it. So if everybody's got the budget document, because this is one of the delivery plans that hasn't been signed off yet, we've set out details in the appendix of where the revenue allocations are shown to go, and so you can find that on page 53 in the document if you've got it open electronically, and so that sets out the detailed projects, and you can see there the variance in spend proposed between 25-26, 26-27 and 27-28.
That's right. I have that in front of me.
So that's the basis of the answer, and it's about anything that's materially changed there, isn't it?
Yeah, which I was about to answer. So we have budgeted provisionally against London, the programme Londoners Get On and Support Londoners' incomes meet their everyday needs at 3.9 million. 25-26, 3.9 million, 26-27, and 2.4 million, 27-28. That's the most substantive difference, which is creating the reduction from 13 million to 11.5.
Right, okay, we've got slightly different figures here. I'll tell you what, tell me what this programme is actually going to deliver at those very high figures. Tell me what this programme actually will do.
So supporting Londoners, sorry, bear with me for a moment. The programme is our financial support programme. So it consists of income maximisation. Income maximisation is where we support Londoners working in partnership with boroughs and VCS organisations on their entitlements to benefits. So these are Londoners who are facing severe financial problems. We have this programme based in community settings like food banks and other places where we know that the poorest of Londoners and those facing the most financial hardship attend. We pay for the Citizens Advice Bureau and the London Legal company to provide advice to Londoners on the benefits that they're entitled to. Since the programme has been in existence, it has put to date £84 million of unclaimed benefits into Londoners' pockets. So we have committed to continue this programme for the next financial year and the financial year afterwards. In the final financial year, the drop represents us looking at how we're going to consolidate and embed, working with partners, the programme to continue, but not to the levels of expenditure that we have previously noted.
Okay, and how do you check that this money is being spent wisely?
Through we have returns, KPIs that our providers and partners have to work towards. We also have we also work with the boroughs to look at how they are supporting this cohort of people to make sure that there is consistent standards across the piece.
I think it's also worth saying, so to support what Tunde said, in addition to that, the other things that fall into the overall programme of reducing inequalities are our work on citizen engagement and the bits we do about, for example, engaging people in City Hall decision making. It covers our non-party political work on civic on democratic and civic participation, as in line with the duties that we have got there. It involves some voluntary sector funding because it covers the contribution that we make to the collective Propel vehicle, where we have leveraged from a small contribution ourselves, very significant extra funding from groups like City Bridge and other members of London Funders. It covers our work on community cohesion.
We're looking at this, we're taking looks at this, Richard, because clearly we may have a massive reduction in budgets. And so I was interested in particular on where these millions were going. So if I wanted to look at it and to have a look at your KPIs, etc., Tunde, where would I go to have a look at that?
So, as you know, as has been said earlier, we will have quarterly dashboards. These are going to be provided to the Assembly, and we are finalising the quarterly dashboard for delivery. Those will be where the KPIs will be presented.
Where would I find them? No, hang on, I haven't finished.
This will be, I'm about to directly answer your question, if that's all right.
I just want to clarify something Tunde has just said. Can you let me ask Tunde?
This will be in quarter three's programme. This will be in quarter three's dashboards, because this is one of the delivery plans that is awaiting final sign-off, so we'll be published very shortly. That will tell you what our success criteria are for each project.
Just 8 minutes. Tunde has just referred to £84 million that has been spent. I'm asking when...
That's incorrect. I said £84 million over the course of, since we started income maximisation, have been put into the pockets of Londoners. And that's an outcome of the work that the GLA have funded.
Yeah, OK, so if the outcome is you have put taxpayers' money into people's pockets, I want to know where the KPIs for that, to make sure that these pockets that you've put our taxpayers' money in is being monitored so that we know it's going in the right direction.
Well, I'll refer you to the answer I gave just a moment ago.
Oh, God, it sounds like Parliament, doesn't it?
I think there are two things here that possibly getting slightly confused, if I can help.
No, not really, because Tunde's in charge of this budget.
The money into Londoners' pockets is through the benefit system.
Yep.
And so it's not GLA money, that's money through the benefit system that the investment we made in people like Citizens Advice enables people to get at the money that they're entitled to. you ask a very fair question then about the, how we show how many people we've helped and, where that £84 million figure comes from. So, today, later today, because today is 35 days after the end of the previous quarter, working days after the end of the previous quarter, we will publish our performance monitoring. This is the first performance monitoring we have had under the new strategic programme approach, and it will set out, therefore, measures for the delivery plans that have been signed off by the Mayor. This is one of the ones that hasn't yet, and so the specific figures will come there in Q3. But very short term, we will set out what the measures are when the Mayor signs off that delivery plan, extracts of which are appended in the budget document.
Okay. I'm really none the better or the wiser, because what you've been answering, Tunde, isn't exactly in line with what I was questioning. But
I'm very happy to write to you and clarify any points that you have.
yeah, I'm very disappointed that it wasn't a simple answer in the first place. I'll go back to you, Chair.
Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. And given that I have a background in terms of running charities, delivering information, advice, guidance services myself, and a big proponent of accessibility to this sort of critical advice that helps people in the most challenging circumstances, give them a lift up, I think it's really incredibly important to see this as a separate programme, specific funding, and most importantly in terms of longer term funding, something we've talked about earlier in the meeting. Tunde, just to clarify, so far within this year's budget, we've got £13.5 million allocated. About halfway through the year, that's already delivered a return in Londoners' pockets of £6.22 on average for every pound that we have spent or will be spending in terms of value for money. Is that right?
What I would say, just as a point of clarity, the 13 million that we're spending on reducing inequalities covers a range of projects. It's just the income maximisation part that I was referring to, Assembly Member Hall, that will fall in the final year of the budget period. But the return on investment, I haven't got the figures in front of me, but we know that the return on investment is actually probably higher than what you just said of that specific project.
And it's also worth clarifying for any future questions on any of the programmes based on figures in the budget table. For the third time saying it now, just so everyone is really clear, that they do not reflect decisions we have made in this round of budgeting processes. That is just the assumptions that we started this financial year with. So there's no secret decision, to assure the committee, there's no secret decisions being made that we are accounted for on this that we have not previously explained in the budget decisions. These are just in the case of the income max thing, which the current budget we're working on this year, which is reflected in the appendices of the budget document, assumes some time-limited funding comes to an end at the end of next financial year. But in terms of what Tunde said, your calculations, if I may say respectfully, were wrong, because the 86 million didn't come from 13 million pounds of funding, it came from 3 million pounds of funding. So just to show what a really fantastic investment this is in Londoners' economic security.
And just lastly, given that so much of what I've said today has been misunderstood, that 84 million covers a 3-year period. So that's a lifetime of the programme. We will be able to break it down individually, year by year, and if we can write to you and Assembly Member Hall on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those important things, and it always, when I used to work in that sector, showing that value for money in terms of how much, for every pound that you spent in that particular type of project, how much extra it's putting into people's pockets is clearly a very straightforward value for money proposition. What I was going to ask about, and Richard has answered part of that, but actually one of the biggest challenges for all of these VCS, voluntary community sector organisations who are delivering these services on our behalf, is having a longer term settlement. We've talked about, and Susan's first question was around that longer term settlement, where does this funding go to in 3 years' time? what are we saying to these organisations that are delivering this service day in, day out about how long we will be funding them for?
So it's a really important point you make, and partners often speak to us about having longer-term settlements. It ensures that they can give their staff certainty and plan for the future, and also innovate with additional funding. But I think it's already been said that it's hard for us to predict the future at this moment in time at the draft budget, till we know what the settlement from government's going to be, various other factors. What we have said to partners is that we are committed to supporting them. The form of that support and how we take this forward could possibly change going forward. It's hard for me to speculate.
But once we do have the longer-term settlements in place, can you give a commitment to this particular type of fund that we will look to fund these organisations on a similar length of time, so that they have the sort of certainty they need to be able to deliver these services as effectively as possible?
It won't be a decision for me as an officer.
All right, so Richard or David then.
However, I know that the Mayor has been supportive of this programme.
You talked about the other services that are being funded out, the £13.5 million. So just to clarify, is that homelessness as well? Is that supporting people who are struggling or coming through from domestic violence, domestic abuse, those sorts of challenges?
No, they're covered in a different programme. Page 50, if it helps, you can just read a list of the projects within that programme on page 53 of the draft budget document we published last week.
Okay, all right, well, thank you very much.
We're now looking at reducing non-residential emissions. Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you. If I can just pick up on inequalities very briefly, and then we'll move on.
Can I just say we're about 20 minutes behind? So
okay. I just have
one question.
Very
quickly.
Thanks. David, there's been changes to visa regulations from the UK government, and my colleague Caroline Russell has been doing a lot of work on its effect on TfL staff. But obviously it's not just TfL, it's Londoners, it's for GLA, it's posts, it's contractors. What work is strategically being done to talk about how we can protect people's jobs?
I'm not sure that's something I'm massively well placed to answer. I don't think it's necessarily a question about people's jobs. The question is about, well, who are colleagues who are impacted by any changes in regulations. Clearly, all organisations in the GLA group will follow the law as Parliament determines it to be, and we will obviously try and do that in a way that best supports as we can any valued members of staff affected. I mean that's basically the position. I guess if you had a question about specifics around GLA and staffing, that would probably be best directed to Mary.
Thanks. Because obviously it affects for people, but it does also potentially affect staffing. Is there work happening, Mary?
Yes, so when the law changed, we clearly did what we had to do and look at who would be affected here. We have nothing like the numbers of staff affected along the lines of TfL, but we do have some. We know who they are. We always work. I mean, even before this law changed, we always work very closely with staff on visas to see the visas coming up and think about reapplication. But at the moment, because of the allocation of such visas that we have as an organisation, we don't foresee it being an issue here at the GLA. But our numbers here are small.
Thank you. Phil, returning to the topic. So what is driving the 40% reduction in expenditure in the Reducing Non-Residential Emissions programme for 2026-27 compared with 25-26 budget?
25-26 includes a significant allocation for the Zero Carbon Accelerator, which was provided from the Green Finance Reserve, which is supporting local authorities, GLA group bodies, and other public bodies across London with technical support to develop investable propositions in terms of commercial and public sector, in terms of public sector retrofit projects. That allocation, that contract, it's Mott MacDonald who provide that support with a wide range of sort of a network of subcontractors to them. That contract comes to an end this year. One of the things that we need to consider as we think about the future of our green finance work is whether it makes sense for the GLA to continue to provide technical support in that way. If it does, there is still, at least for now, funding available within that Green Finance Reserve, which might allow us to continue it. But there may well be other ways in which we can support the development of investable propositions without drawing upon what, as we know in this budget context, are constrained funds. So that will be something we will look at, but we need to make sure that pipeline continues to come through.
And to be very clear, as I said again, just for the avoidance of any doubt, these are not budget proposals. These are just a statement of the presumptions that were made at the beginning of this financial year in the last budget around how they play forward, just translated into the new format of describing it by programme. So this is not, that the end of that one-off funding has been in the public domain now for a number of years. Phil is quite right, though. It is clearly the point of us as a strategic authority to work to enable private green finance of the carbon transition and the transition to a more climate resilient city. Whether continuing that contract in its current way is the right way to do that is a decision that we need to take, working with boroughs and other potential funders over the next few months, and we'll see the implications of, I think, where some of that funding comes out in the next, when we actually publish a proposed budget for next year, which this is not. And therefore, it's so given I don't want to get into, for obvious reasons, because soon as I start saying what is safe, it will start leading to some pretty obvious conclusions about what isn't, getting into prejudging what maybe end up being some difficult conversations with staff around how we reallocate resource or potentially slightly reduce resource. I'm not going to get into prejudging what the contents of the GLA Mayor budget will actually be. This isn't it, but the capacity to drive significant amounts of private finance remains a critical objective of the GLA as a strategic authority.
Can I check? I'm presuming that's why there's so many blank spaces on this spreadsheet.
Well, quite a lot of them, I think, because they're revenue projects that don't require any capital funding. So most of the blank spaces on the spreadsheet are on the capital column, but yes.
And there are some programmes where, they rely on GLA staff time, which is captured in the core staffing element of it, rather than relying on the GLA providing programme funding and so on.
But this is a lot of blanks on revenue. I'm talking about page 55.
So yes, so supporting and the GLA group to consume and generate clean power. We have some of the staff within our energy team are undertaking the work on that. That's captured under the line at the very bottom that says core staffing to support programmes. We don't have a GLA revenue or capital funding plan proposed for that, because ultimately that's about helping other parts of the GLA group to deploy the money that they spend on energy procurement more effectively and more sustainably as possible. So, and there will be others. There is developing a new strategy for enabling London to access green finance. There's a small amount of money there this year to support the Climate Task Force, but we expect the Climate Task Force work to have been done at or around the end of this financial year, and then the implementation will be picked up through some of those other lines and through the work of the team.
And finally, just in terms of transparency, I hear that it's caveated with an if, because you're not doing these negotiations in public, and I get that. But withdrawing technical support feels like that would be quite a significant move away from that. In terms of the pros and cons of how you're weighing that up, will we see a report about that after the decision is made?
I think that's probably one of the issues that we will be considering through the Climate Task Force as to what's most important in unlocking that private finance alongside what the GLA can provide. It's important to say, the support that we provide through the Zero Carbon Accelerator is not the only support that the GLA is helping to unlock for low carbon projects. For example, we have put 50 million into a joint fund with Sustainable Development Capital Limited called the EDGE Fund. The whole purpose of that, the whole sort of modus operandi of that fund is that it works with bidders to both support, to bring Sustainable Development Capital limited sort of investment understanding to support them to develop bids alongside looking at the deployment of that capital. So I think the key thing is, is not how much should the GLA provide here, but is what is the best way of providing technical support to unlock the greatest level of finance into this challenge.
I get all of that, but I felt like it didn't quite answer the question, because this is a shift, and the Mayor's talked about this a fair bit in the past. And if this is moving away from that, then that's quite a big decision. And as Assembly members, it's important to scrutinise why those decisions are made.
Please do not read that into this. This is a historic statement of some budget presumptions. What we will end up doing is maintaining a strength and capacity to drive green finance to finance the transition. That's the objective here. What we're at risk of, and this is inevitable at this point in a budget process where we have published as an appendix some historic tables, which are being, I think, wrongly, if I may say, interpreted as a current set of budget propositions. They're not. Is people may want to stay those questions until they actually see what the budget propositions actually are.
And so, and I've said finally a couple of times, I'm not interpreting them, and I totally get that. But what I am saying is, once that decision is made, how will we be able to mark for homework?
Through our delivery, through our performance measures, and through the Environment Committee talking to the Deputy Mayor, the Mayor, and all the other ways you'd usually get to mark our homework.
This sounds vague if the environment strategy isn't being used anymore. The mandates and deliveries have gone, and now one of the major programmes for green investments sounds like it could be at risk.
The mandates. The mandates and the programmes are very much not gone. That is what will drive our performance dashboards that you will have absolute access to, and will give us a pretty clear readout on how we think we're getting along, both at a kind of numbers level, but also at a strategic level as well.
I'll keep going, but I sense the Chair won't let me. Thanks, Chair.
I mean, other people. I'm an equitable distributor of time, Assemblymember Polanski. Climate resilience and clean air. Assemblymember Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. The question is to Phil. So the 10 million allocated to delivering a greener, more climate resilient London, what exactly is that intending to achieve with that money?
It's intending to support the provision of higher quality, more accessible, more biodiverse green spaces for Londoners. It's supporting the work that we are doing to clean up London's waterways, and it's supporting our work with infrastructure providers, with boroughs, with utility companies and others around London's overall climate resilience.
And a similar question on the 2 million for cleaning London's air programme. Again, what is that actually going to achieve? And it sounds like quite a small sum of money in the grand scheme of everything else. I think it's the smallest money allocated to one of these individual programmes. So again, what will that actually achieve, and is it sufficient?
I'm sorry, I've switched myself off. The Clean London's Air delivery plan focuses on, first of all, work to understand, having met London's existing legal limits for air quality. The Mayor has always said he aspires to achieve the World Health Organization limits, and so there is work to understand what would be required to achieve those limits. There's work following the implementation of the ultra-low emission zone to tackle some of the remaining significant sources of particularly of particulate matter in London's air, so particularly around what always gets written up as NRMM, which is non-road mobile machinery, so it's effectively construction machinery that works off the road network, and to reduce exposure where doing so can deliver the greatest benefits, and that's where our the 2.7 million that we're putting into school filters for air quality filters for schools plays an important part.
Okay, I'd perhaps like to ask a supplementary about sort of climate policy more broadly across the piece and the cost associated with that. And given the Mayor's accelerated green pathway target of net zero by 2030 rather than the government's legally binding target of 2050. What is the incremental cost of that to us as an organisation, to Londoners, by pursuing that target that the Mayor would like to do rather than what he actually statutorily has to do?
We haven't looked at the incremental difference between the two, so I couldn't provide you with a simple number in terms of the overall sort of cost differential. But I mean, ultimately, I think the cost differential is going to be would be about timing rather than overall cost in the most part. However, I think it's really critical to say, as well as a cost differential, there is a benefit differential, and bringing the costs of to the extent that you can bring the costs of decarbonisation forward, you are also bringing the impact of that work forward, and that's important both in terms of earlier action to address emissions, to improve London's resilience, but also earlier impact in terms of the green jobs and the economic benefits that it can bring to the capital.
It would be helpful to have an idea of the additional cost, because clearly a choice has been made to do something more quickly than would otherwise have been necessary, and it would be helpful to understand how much extra that's costing us.
I think we would have to look at, the extent to, we have built a significant degree of climate modelling and of understanding of the implications of achieving that goal in London to meet the targets that the Mayor has set for us. So we have that information available. The Mayor hasn't asked us to assess the costs of achieving the 2050 target. So while, I will be, I can work with the team around what we could say about that. I'm not sure that it would be practical to do the same level of detailed work to be able to generate a completely a perfect comparator.
But anything you could share would be interesting. Thank you.
Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you. Just looking at the level of expenditure in the 25-26 for the 2 million a year. Just going across the years, given the figure is the same on the budget spent, do you feel this represents, it does represent a real terms decrease? Are there any projects that could be potentially impacted?
Is this in relation to Cleaning London's Air?
Yes, the Cleaning London's Air programme.
There are always there is always additional work we could undertake against the Cleaning London's Air programme or against any of these programmes in order to deliver additional benefits and to drive forward progress more quickly. We are on the Cleaning London's Air piece. I think there would be additional investment in the sensor networks. If you look at the capital programmes, there we are looking at that is time limited work. For example, we could we could expand the school filters programme. We could take that forward into future years. There's always additional work. That is the purpose of any budget process, is to choose where you put your efforts. But I think it is important to say, as I mentioned to Assembly Member Wilson, the Mayor and London has over the last year achieved its legal requirements for air quality, which I don't think is something that very many or any other city in the UK has achieved. We want to go further, but actually having hit that milestone, it is probably a good moment to take a step back and understand what the most effective measures would be to achieve the next goal that the Mayor is setting for us, which is the level set in the World Health Organization guidance.
Okay, so just to be clear, so the 2 million a year. So if you had more, you'd spend it on these additional projects. So there's no sort of organisational impact.
I don't know if we would spend it on those additional projects. I'm highlighting a couple of areas in which we could spend more money. In terms of organisational impacts, no, I mean we have the team is in place to deliver the programme as we have set out, and we constantly, as in any organisation, we constantly look at how our resources are deployed to deliver the priorities that are set for us. So a decision, not to provide additional money in addition on top of what is provided in this budget, particularly at a point where we're really constrained for resources and having to look at, maybe having to look at some more difficult choices, is not something that has an impact on the team in place. The team has been designed to deliver the budget as set out over recent years.
Okay, supporting Londoners to benefit from growth. Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. These questions, well, the first one, Tunde or Richard. So how does the 26-27 budget move the allocation of the Adult Skills Fund to a more employer-led model?
Sure. So there are a few programmes that we are bringing online. So this year we are, and it was announced when we launched the Inclusive Talent Strategy, we are piloting what we're calling talent boards. So this is a big shift from the way that we've commissioned in the past, where we're ensuring that employers are in the driving seat. And so for some sectors within the Inclusive Talent Strategy, within the growth plan, are going to have boards that are made up of employer representatives who will, in effect, be responsible for recommending commissioning decisions in terms of the skills that they need and the employers that they represent need. This year, for 25-26, we're piloting the construction, life science, and there is another one, and I will get that in a moment for you. And so we've allocated 19.7 million for them to be able to commission. As we move forward, we are hoping to bring more talent boards online. And as you can see from the figures, that means that in 26-27, we're spending 52.2 million towards the newer boards that get formed. This is coming out of the Adult Skills Fund. So there's a shift towards more focus on the sectors that are key to London's growth.
It all sounds incredibly positive, and clearly making sure that we've got businesses on board as to what sort of jobs will be being created at the moment and in the future is a key element of making sure that the Adult Skills Fund gets spent as wisely as possible. In terms of supporting Londoners to benefit from growth programme, there appears to be a £33 million reduction for 26-27 compared to last year. What impact would you see that having on the programme? I mean, I know we're talking about obviously new programmes that haven't existed before, so could you just explain what that difference looks like and how that's come about?
So we know that the government has said that the Adult Skills Fund will be reduced in going forwards by about 11 million. We're still waiting for the exact figure. That's inevitably there will be fewer courses that we'll put on, and that will be the effect of that reduction. However, we have used reserves to make sure that we've cushioned the impact. So rather than it being in real terms an 11 million reduction for the sector, it's going to be somewhere within the region of 8.4 million. We're still working out and working with providers what that will look like going forward. But with a reduction in budget, there's obviously choices that we have to make.
And obviously, you talked about it being welcome that there's more work with businesses and so on. Is there scope, opportunity for businesses to be contributing some of their funds that they obviously allocate for this area to match some of the gap that we'll be seeing in future years? 100%.
So I think investment from businesses into skills has fallen over the last 20 years. We know from our research, so the employer-led system that we're trying to create is based on the SkillNet system that runs in Ireland, And we know that the fact that employers being responsible and closer to commissioning does encourage co-investment over there. Likewise, international comparators in Atlanta and various other cities have created the same model, and that has also created co-investment. So one of the work streams that we're looking at is co-investment. What we're trying to create is a different type of working with employers. We have got precedent for this. So the Mayor Skills Academy, one of the areas that we worked with was the health, social care sector, and the NHS put in quite a lot into the training as well for the Mayor Skills Academy. What we're trying to do is replicate that across all of the sectors in the growth plan that are key to our growth.
And we've seen the biggest challenge in terms of employability, and unsurprisingly, because it's always a challenge when you have just starting off in the jobs market, but it is amongst younger people. Yeah. Under 25s really struggling to get into jobs and keep those jobs. And obviously they've got the added challenge of a fast-paced changing jobs market with as AI, I'm not going to pronounce it like Boris Johnson does, evolves over at such a rate of knots. What are we doing to make sure the funds that we're allocating specifically supports younger people?
So there's a few things. You may have heard that the government announced what's called employment trailblazers. So there's within London, and that was a part of a delegated fund towards the GLA and the London system. What the GLA is specifically doing with those funds is we are funding what we are calling system coordination. So we are funding what's called a youth offer. We are still in negotiation, so it hasn't been finalised, but it will. The building blocks, the elements of it will include young people having mentoring, targeting young people who are at risk of NEET, which is not in education, employment and training. We know ensuring that we're working with the health system for mental health support. We know that the 16 to 24 economic inactive cohort, a lot of that is based on anxiety. So ensuring that they've got that support as well. And then working with a range of partners, from youth services to colleges to housing to VCS to boroughs with our sub-regional partners to ensure that there's what we call a no wrong door. So wherever a young person presents, they will get a consistent offer. I heavily caveat that with that's our ambition. We are now working across with multiple partners to make that a reality, but we're making progress.
Final question from myself, just in terms of, and unfortunately, of course, Diane's not with us at the moment, but in terms of how much of our apprenticeship levy do we currently use as a percentage? If you don't have that, if you could share that with us, and how do we leverage in apprenticeship levies that aren't currently being utilised by businesses across London to support particularly young people?
Your first question, I'll have to write back to you. That's for the GLA. On the second question, one of the things that we are working towards and in negotiation with government is what's called levy pooling, where lots of organisations that have underused levy contributions pool them together, and then the plan is to use our talent pools to see how best that they can be used. And that's one of the exciting things about the upcoming settlements is that there's a possibility of using it flexibly, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional apprenticeship. What a lot of our businesses are telling us is that they prefer short modular courses sometimes that top up existing skills, as well as the traditional apprenticeship. So we're looking for full flexibility.
That's really welcome. Thank you.
Assemblymember Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Tunde is regarding the universal free school meals, and it's what impact does the government's commitment to extend free school meals to every pupil whose household is on universal credit, what impact does it have on our programme in terms of costs?
I'll take that one if that's all right.
Oh, yes.
I've been overseeing this programme. The straight answer at the moment is we are currently modelling it, but we don't yet know the final figure. The modelling depends both on trying to get the kind of detailed benefits data and also trying to get a kind of hard assumption about the number of kids we think will be in London's school system next year, we slightly overestimated the number of kids in eligible kids for for our scheme this year. So we've got a slight underspend in this year's budget, as the thing we'll publish later today will show. So we just want to make sure we get those assumptions right. But that number will start to feature in further iterations of this budget.
Any idea of a ballpark?
Not at the moment, no, sorry.
Is it tens of millions? Okay. Let me see if I got anything further. No, I have nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Helping local economies to thrive. Assemblymember Clark.
Yes, hello, good morning. Phil, I'm going to come to you. What is driving the reduction in the 26-27 revenue expenditure on helping local economies to thrive compared to the budget of 25-26? It's the one that looks like a person. Okay. Maybe this isn't working.
Pardon me. Yes. As I understand it, this one relates to some revenue support that was provided via UK SPF to support placemaking work in boroughs that clearly comes to an end as the UK SPF funding ends, and so we aren't able to take forward further.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I know that boroughs did quite a lot of very positive things for high streets and local economies with that funding. So it is a real shame to see that coming to an end. What is the capital element of the Helping Local Economies to Thrive program expected to deliver in 26-27?
We know what the programme is.
Yeah, fair.
I mean,
okay, fair enough.
The capital element that's in the budget at the moment beyond this year is very limited.
Yeah.
It is the money that we have earmarked for capital support for creative enterprise zones, which targets small-scale renovations to improve sustainability and develop new workspace. And it includes the second year of funding for what we call the Civic Partnerships Programme, which was a programme which made use of some returns from the Growing Places Fund to support, again, exemplar high streets regeneration projects. We supported 12 strategies to be developed, and there are 5 projects in delivery now. But other than those schemes, the vast majority of the capital funding within that project was the £20 million that we provided via UK SPF, and clearly we have no certainty around that and no obvious source of replacement funds should there be no replacement from government.
That's really helpful. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Climate budgeting. Assemblymember Polanski.
Thank you very much, Chair. Phil again. GLA power purchase agreements, are their plans progressing? GLA Group, obviously.
Yes, there are. And I think the power purchase agreement that has recently been signed by TfL is a really good example of that we are, and our commitment to it. In the previous year's climate budget, in the unfunded table for the GLA, there was a proposal around significant capital investment in solar generation capacity, which is not in the table this time round. However, there is the funding to support sort of project development and strategy development across the GLA group that we provide in Table A, which is the funded projects. I would say the joint investment project that we're talking about, the sort of solar farm, isn't off the table. It's something that we are still continuing to work on, and we expect to bring some advice to the Group Collaboration Board on that reasonably soon. but the world looks quite different, I think, from when that project was initially proposed. And partly there are now alternative mechanisms for GLA group bodies and other parts of the public sector to buy into PPA contracts through the Crown Commercial Service that didn't group purchasing mechanisms that weren't in place previously, and TfL is demonstrating what can be achieved as a single bidder, but PPA contracts are complex. There are more people who want to enter into them than there is supply for them at the moment, so it's a bit of a seller's market. So we are also looking at at the other mechanisms that we could use to achieve the Mayor's goal, to which he's completely committed, of moving the GLA group entirely as quickly as he can onto zero carbon energy.
Thank you. Let's get some more people wanting solar, I see. Can you provide an update on the latest round of applications for the Green Finance Fund?
We had the biggest, the largest, or at least the highest value set of applications that we have had of any of the rounds of expressions of interest run this time around. We had over 200 million in expressions of interest. I don't want to give a running commentary on who they are, because part of the point of this process is that we are trying to find the highest quality schemes, and some of them may fall away. But I think it gives an indication that the Green Finance Fund is continuing to respond to a need across London's public sector.
And to what extent is that investment repaying the initial loan?
Most of those are investments that are made over a 20 or 25-year period. So, those repayments will accrue over a significant period of time. But I don't think there's any reason, I don't think, these are organisations that have had to borrow on prudential terms for the most part, so they've had to think very carefully about their ability to repay and entering into these negotiations, and they're not organisations that, as parts of the UK's public sector, that would naturally be expected to default. So I don't think we have concerns about the repayment profile in these areas.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
That actually brings us to our final section, which is on GLA reserves. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I appreciate we've got to be finished very quickly, so I'm just going to go to Faye and ask one very quick question. The budget document actually shows that reserve balances are being maintained for various things, and the one that sticks out to me, anyways, why on earth do we need a £71 million climate change reserve?
So this was an investment as part of our GF Green Finance Fund in order to have resources available to fund some of those commitments in that delivery plan. I was checking in that I'm making sure that's right. So that effectively is what that reserve was. I think it was set up a while ago, and that's the purpose of that reserve. We will be thinking about all the level of reserves as part of the budget process, and so you will see in the next iteration, there will be a reserve strategy and a review of our level of reserves, and I think that report talks about the fact that we're going to be doing that.
Good. Well, I look forward to seeing that being reduced. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
I don't see any other indications, so I think that brings us to the end of our questions. I'd like to thank our guests for attending. Thank you very much, and for answering all of our many and varied questions. We have a couple of bits of business just to wrap up the meeting, but you're welcome to leave. You don't need to sit through those. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? And can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Item 7, payments over £250. Can I ask the committee to note the report? Item 8, committee work programme. Can we note the committee's work programme and future meeting dates? Well done. Date of next meeting of the committee will be in a fortnight on the 1st of December at 10 a.m. here in the Chamber in City Hall. I have no urgent business today, so that concludes today's meeting. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.